Oh yeah. I got a story to tell. Buenas noches. Look at my brothers here in the chat, man. It's good to see you guys. JP, budget collecting. Unruly Simeon. This title intrigues me. Very good. I think I have something interesting in store for you. The man himself, Mr. Boy Who Had 7. Great to see you. Disco, my comic book cousin, in the house. Very good, very good. All right, guys. Yeah, I've been ripping through these freaking Jack Kirby collector magazines, right? Dude, these things are so dope. They're fucking fascinating. They're like chock full of these killer articles and like insider type stories, and I love them. And there's this one story that I've like read a few times over. I think it's such a fun little story about Atlas and Marvel, and I'm gonna break it down. I got some visual aids to go along with it. I think it's gonna be pretty cool. You know what I'm saying? Buenas noches to mi amigo El Roger El Metarog. Go in the house. 36 chambers. I would highlight you, but you scrolled up on the thing, and I'm just gonna mess it up. Cool. Yeah, so we're gonna do a little story time, and then to be honest, I've made the decision that I'm gonna hang in at the 84 layer. As a sober lifestyle guy that I am. You know what I'm saying? I'd usually skip New Year's. It's a little too turn up for me, and the day kind of revolves. The evening anyway kind of revolves around getting fucked up, and that those days are behind your boy. Okay, so I'm just chilling in. I'm probably bouncing around YouTube with you fuckers all night. So I'm really happy that you guys showed up. Make a brother feel loved. Terry, what up, dog? Thank you, Unruly. Appreciate you. All right, let me cut to it. Well, before I do, I'm going to give you one little mini quick story time. Because if you watched my Biggie Shack contest entry video, dude, I don't know what happened, but it cut out like halfway through, and it was funny. It was like, I think it was Spidey Fan or Goat was like, this is the first ever contest entry cliffhanger. It was so funny when the video cut off. I'm like, let me tell you some historical fact about my neighborhood, and then it was like click. So real quick, the abridged version is, if you watched that video, you saw that I live like on this little peninsula part of my city, right? So there's one way in and out into my little strip, and I'm all surrounded by water. And there's a military fort. Fort Tabor is down at the back on the end. So that used to be an active military headquarters, with like, you can see like there was like a turret gun and shit. It's a pretty cool spot. It's like a historical thing down there. Nowadays it's just a place where people walk their dogs and shit, but it's still pretty cool. Yo, D-Runk, what up? Dylan, what up, man? So the historical fact was going to be that during the Revolutionary War, the Brits invaded that fort. Their ships rolled up and invaded Fort Tabor, and there was some ocean battles going on. And the British fucking made quick work of that fort, and blasted through us. And then the British historically marched their asses all the way up this little peninsula thing that I live on. They marched their way up, raising hell. And they went, and if you continue down past that peninsula, you get to like downtown, my downtown part. And it's like a strip with all the historical buildings, and it, it was like kind of like the poppin' spot. That's where banks were and shit in my city. And they historically marched their way all the way up down to that city spot and just like burned shit down to the ground. I wish I had a heroic story that like we fucked them up and we kept them at bay, but the Brits just invaded our ass, dude, and torched all of this peninsula and gave us a good beat down. But we got them in the end, didn't we, brother? We got those fucking Brits in the end, dude. That was the story I was going to tell. Hi, Leah. Where's Hi, Leah? Yo. Unruly with the fucking win on that comment. Machine gun sound effects for the Revolutionary War. Oh, that's so fucking funny, dude. So funny. Oh, shit. Go, hi, Leah. All my buddies. All right, let me get to this. I'm not going to draw this thing out. Let me just tell you this little story. So, it's all coming from, I'm going to read a lot of it to you and stuff. It's based on this article, The Great Atlas Implosion. Because I learned some stuff as I went through. And you notice I put in the title, and the all-star Monroe Froehlich Jr., okay? Yo, Patrick Wall, what up? Monroe Froehlich Jr. And this guy, like, inadvertently created Marvel Comics and the superhero era that we have today. So let me pop this on first. I'm just going to do that there. Oh, I can do this too because I ran out of my... Apparently when you have the free account, you only have so many streaming time. I guess I stream a whole lot. So I paid the upgrade thing, so I got the fancy setup now. For this month anyway. So I'm going to do it like that. Yo, Biggie, what up, bro? All right, so here's the story. So here's the setup, okay? This guy started this guy who wrote this article. It all started with him going through like the ownership statements of Atlas Comics. And like started going through and finding out the names and the players and everything. And this story kind of unraveled, right? So, part one, the setup. Atlas Comics, as you may have known, was not really a comics company, but just a distribution company. So the comics were so Martin Goodman is the top dog of Atlas Comics at this time. Okay, so you want to remember that guy's name, Martin Goodman. He's the top dog. So Atlas Comics was only the distribution company. And Martin Goodman, who was actually the companies he owned that were publishing the comics was actually Chippenden Comics, Timely Comics, and Red Circle Comics, etc. There's a couple more. So those were the companies that were actually publishing the comics. And then Atlas Comics was only distributing them, right? But the dude was slick because Martin Goodman, he owned all those companies. He owned Atlas as the distributor, and then he owned all the publishers, Timely, Red Circle, da-da-da. And so Atlas was distributing those comics, and those publishing companies were paying Atlas Comics a fee, like a handsome fee, to distribute the comics. So this guy, Martin Goodman, was like super double dipping, with this setup. So he was pretty slick, right? So bang, that's the setup. Now, the catalyst. Monroe Froehlich Jr., our boy, Monroe Froehlich Jr., was Goodman's golfing partner back in the day. And he finagled himself into being the business manager of Atlas Comics. Okay. Yo, collectible paper, what up? So Monroe Froehlich, he got himself into the position of being business manager, and he pretty much had free reign with the comics, but he was kept out of the distribution end. He was kept out of the Atlas distribution part of it. Yo, take care, Raul. I didn't see what he said, but be safe out there, Hialeah, my brother. Now, Monroe Froehlich, though, was an ambitious cat, and he wanted to get in on some of that distribution action. And this motherfucker, Arthur Marchand, fucking Arthur Marchand was doing everything in his power to keep our good pal Monroe Froehlich Jr. from getting his beak wet on the distribution part. Because as a dude who was really just representing for the publishers, like they were taking an ill beating on the distribution fees that they had to pay Atlas, you know, but Martin Goodman was fucking greedy. So, you know, he was messing, Froehlich knew that his publishers could thrive a little better, wasn't for Goodman's greedy ass taking such a big cut, distributing it through Atlas. But Goodman owned everything, so what are you gonna do? You know what I'm saying? What up, Vinny? So that's the catalyst. Now, next up, the ploy, it says. As Froehlich was frustrated in his attempts to gain control over the distribution arm, he eventually resorted to some subtle business maneuvering to accomplish what office politics had failed to do. He somehow renegotiated the contract between the publishing arm, Red Circle Timely, and the Atlas company, so that the latter, Atlas, received a much lesser percentage of the cut. And on paper, Atlas magazines began to lose money. Dun, dun, dun. The sting, okay? And I'm going to get into my visual aids in a second as the story progresses. Right now, we're just talking about Atlas. The sting. Froehlich exploited this apparent change in the distribution situation to convince Goodman that he needed to switch to a national distributor. So, you know, by him, he can somehow, I don't know how he pulled that off, but he convinced Goodman to let loose or make the deal a little sweeter for the publishers. And in turn, Atlas was losing money distributing these comics. So he's like, look, dude, we need to shop this out to a national distributor. You're losing money, bro. Even though he must be like, wink, wink. It's because he fucking maneuvered it that way. But thank God he did. So he's like, we need to go to a national distributor. And in the summer of 1956, Goodman gave the go-ahead. And Froehlich negotiated a 5-year contract with American News Company to distribute the comics, magazines, and Lion paperbacks, regular books. Goodman disbanded the distribution system, and Froehlich was now king of the hill. Next section is called The Zinger, okay? So American News Company, the company that is now the national distributor, was mafia connected, okay? Was mafia connected and was currently under investigation by the government for less than legal transactions. Because they were into a lot of different shit. Like restaurants, for example. And there was a lot of troubles. You know, if they were into restaurants in the 50s and the Rat Pack era, you know they were fucking getting into some grimy shit. So, rumors were flying around that ANC, American News Company, was going to go belly up. Even before the contract, Arthur Marchand, that dude that was, you know, cock-blocking earlier, he had tried to warn Goodman of that potential problem, but Goodman thought that he was just playing games to mess with our hero of the story, Monroe Froehlich. So, now let's move on to the crash. American News Company assumed distribution of the Goodman line. Okay, that's all the pulps and the comics and the paperbacks. But 6 months later, American News Company shut down, as we would have predicted, because all the mafia bullshit, right? Not having time to reestablish his old network, Goodman was forced to lay off the entire staff, except for one man, who goes by the name of Stanley Lieber, brother. Stan Lee. Okay? So he fired the whole staff, but kept Stan Lee. That's all he could afford. So he lays everybody off, keeps Stan Lee while he's searching for another distributor to try to figure it out. During this time, they were playing games to keep up with orders, and like a lot of comics, like Dippy Duck, for example, had an October 1957 cover date, but they were actually shipped in like August, September. So they were putting later months on these books to make it seem like they were staying more current than they were, but they were just, buying time, essentially. Now, Goodman did find himself a distributor eventually, and it was DC Comics owned Independent News Company. They agreed to take him on as a new account, but the terms were tough because Independent would handle all of the magazines, the comics, but they wouldn't take on the books, the paperback books, because they already whatever. And as far as the comics go, DC wasn't about to support its biggest and most successful rival. So Independent News insisted that only 8 comics per month would be accommodated. So they made them slash all the output they were putting out, because DC's like, we'll print some of your shit, but we're not going to let you go nuts because we're printing our DC shit over here. So Goodman and Lee opted to use that allotment to publish 16 bi-monthly titles. Okay? 16 bi-monthly titles. The first 8, here's where my visual aids are going to come in. The first 8 were Gunsmoke Western, Homer the Happy Ghost, Kid Colt Outlaw, Love Romances. Maybe I'll make myself small for these covers. Let's do that. Love Romances, Marines in Battle, Millie the Model, Miss America, and My Own Romance. Those came out dated November 1957. That's only 8 titles. And then the second batch of 8 titles were Battle Comics, Navy Combat, Patsy and Hetty, Career Girls, Strange Tales, you know that one, Two Gun Kid, and the other 2 I didn't get covers of, World of Fantasy and Wyatt Earp. Okay, so that's the predicament they're in at that moment. Okay, I know I'm so small. Help! Boom. Let's do this again. So boom, that's where we're at. So our hero Monroe Froehlich threw a fucking wrench in things so that Atlas wasn't being greedy with the distribution, forced them to mess with that company. There's a little recap. Forced them to mess with the mafia-owned company. They went belly up. And then in almost a move of desperation, they had to go to the enemy, the competitor, DC. And they're like, we'll do it, bro, but you got to slash. You got to tighten everything up. And that's why Stan Lee was the only man left, basically. And they had to run a really tight ship. To give you an idea of how dominant Atlas was in the comic industry before that happened, he cites a few different interviews with other artists and creators, and he was saying that they all acted like the comic industry almost was over. Like it was like a great recession of comics at that time. So it was a tough time to be a creator because that made life tough. But they cite some sales numbers. So total monthly sales by companies that year shows that Marvel headed the list in 1952 with 15.2 million issues sold, twice that of any company except in the next competitor, closest competitor was Dell Comics at 10 million. But they were totally smoking everybody by double. In 1957, 5 years later, after all that bullshit happened, their position falls to fourth with 4.6 million. They imagine that. They were at 15.2 mil in comics sold in 1952. That's when all life was good. That's when Goodman was double dipping and all that. And then after all the wheels fell off, just 5 years later, this shit dwindled to 4.6 million. Dell, who years past was at 10 million, it was closest competitor, was now at 14 million. They were the big dog on campus. And DC Comics was at about 7.5 million. Let me pop in with the chat real quick. Aggressively, Kirby was a romantic. When you saw the shit he saw and thought you might never see a girl again because of Nazis, you gained a high appreciation for the dames. Yeah. Wasn't that also the time frame of Warner and the Comics Code? That would make sense. That would make sense. The what is it? Seduction of the innocent. So anyway, huge downfall, right? I just want to illustrate that with the numbers. So it wasn't until December 1958 that Stan Lee gathered around him the core of what was to be Marvel Comics. Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko. Guys, help me with what these other first names are. That's when he snagged up Kirby, Ditko, Heck, Heck, Ayers, Ayers, and Reinman, Reinman. Truthfully, the only names I know are Kirby and Ditko. And it says, this lends credence to Kirby's claim that he had found Stan Lee despondent on his desk, ready to throw in the towel. Because when you hear Kirby tell it, he's like, yeah, when I came into Marvel, Stan Lee was a scrub, hunched over his desk. He didn't know what to do. And Kirby basically insinuating like, and then I saved his ass, you know? So there's something to that. Over the next few years, Goodman was free to publish whatever he liked. But whenever he wanted to introduce a new title, another had to be sacrificed. So Battle got cut in 1960 to make way for My Girl Pearl. And then My Girl Pearl got cut in 1961 to make way for Amazing Adventures. Finally, they added a 17th title in 1961. Fantastic Four #1. Which, really, Fantastic Four #1, like, if I'm understanding the timeline correctly and where we're about to go with the story, Fantastic Four #1 is like really the birth of superhero Marvel comics. Like, I know there were, Amazing Adventures was still being printed and stuff, but as far as like flagship title, a team with their own book, Fantastic Four #1 is a really important book, dude. They really fucking kicked off Marvel Comics in the superhero age that we know, the Silver Age, you know? It was time to renegotiate the contracts with independent news. At that point, Marvel Comics was a force to be reckoned with in the industry, and independent didn't want to lose a good client. The restrictions on the number of books was lifted, and Marvel exploded. And that's when at that point, that's when their 3 books that they were sharing split. Those 3 books being Tales to Astonish. Whoops. That's when they finally had enough juice and mojo to split Tales to Astonish, Strange Tales, which was sharing Doctor Strange. This one was sharing Hulk and Submariner, I think. Strange Tales, who was he mainly sharing with? Doctor Strange and I think, not Thor. Human Torch, I guess? And Tales of Suspense, which was largely an Iron Man and Captain America book. So it's at that point that they finally got the juice, brother, to give these characters that they were building in the bullpen in these split books and launched the Murderer's Row lineup of the 60s that we all know and love. Captain America 100. That's because Tales of Suspense 99 then flipped to Cap 100. That's why Captain America 100 is such a huge, important book to have. Shout out to you, Biggie Shaq. Cap 100, that's his first solo title. Doctor Strange number 169, that's his first title. Nick Fury, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., got his number 1 at that point. What's it called? Is it not Tales to Astonish? Yeah, Tales to Astonish turned into Hulk 102. So Hulk gets his own book. Iron Man, boom, back in his own book. Submariner, bang, in his own book. You know what I mean? So right there's the pop-off point where Marvel just starts killing it. Marvel Comics starts killing it. So now we're going to wrap up here pretty soon. By 1957, oh no, that's going backwards. Yeah, 1957, Atlas was the largest comics company that had ever existed. But they had never been a leader or an innovator. That dude, Goodman, his empire was built. The way this guy words it is cool. Goodman's empire was built on selling paper, not innovation. He wasn't thinking about the creativity part of it. In the way this guy, if one Western comics was good, 10 were better. If superheroes were selling at that point, you can bet your ass that Atlas would have been publishing them indiscriminately. Stan Lee had resurrected Atlas heroes in 1954, but he dropped most of them after 3 or 4 issues. In fandom lore, DC had been credited in 1956 with bringing superheroes back from their dark ages with the appearance of Flash in Showcase number 4. But the reality is, it had been less than 7 years since the original Flash comic was canceled. Batman and Superman had been running uninterrupted all that time, and the marketplace was still not clamoring for superhero books. So they're making the point that DC was printing superhero books. It's not like Marvel came up with the new idea of making superhero books, but DC just had Showcase, Action Comics, and Detective, really, for superheroes. And it wasn't until Stan Lee and that fucking crew in the 60s popped off all those Marvel comics that they really popped off the superhero genre that we know and love today. So you'll notice I didn't really mention much of that Monroe Froehlich guy later in the story. He's the all-star. Like, he went away. You know what I'm saying? Like, he didn't necessarily have a happy ending. His all-star fame comes to having the nuts to be like, this guy Goodman is fucking double dipping. The comic companies are suffering because this guy is like wicked taking the lion's share of the publishing, and he threw the wrench in that shit, which technically he helped facilitate their downfall, but that downfall made it so that they had to run a tighter ship, put Stan Lee at the helm, and they just had to rely on creative rather than just being in the paper printing business. So that's why Monroe Froehlich is the guy. And let's end on this. He says this thing was printed in 1998, okay? So, yeah, Froehlich got whacked. Yeah, Froehlich got whacked for fucking things up, dude. uh, just get a drink, loosen up. Why, do I not seem loose? No, I'm chilling, man. I'm loose. Yeah, I don't drink, but I'm loose, baby. I think maybe it's because I'm reading in front of you guys live. I was gonna make this like a pre-recorded thing. That's probably the better format for this, but I'm like, fuck it. I'm just gonna go live. I'll be among friends. So if I look stiff, it's probably just because I'm reading in front of you guys and trying not to fuck it up, you know. So this was printed in the mid '90s, right? Look what he writes on the end of this paragraph. It's interesting how history repeats itself. Marvel and distributors today seem to be an unhealthy mix. Maybe after all the current dust clears, Marvel will have to scale back and start creating interesting comics again. If you ask me, that shit still holds true today, maybe more than ever. Because if you want my opinion, I feel like Marvel Comics kind of is back in that paper printing business, you know? Granted, there's a few titles that, seems like they have passionate, creative, you know? Immortal Hulk series was good. Venom, you know, Detective Comics is good, has its moments and stuff, but I still feel like Marvel and DC would both benefit from not trying to flood the shelves with paper and scale it back, dude, and worry about putting out the best product you can, especially nowadays when we're going into more of a digital age. Like, you don't want to be just strictly in the paper printing business, man. You want to create gripping stories. You want to get a murderer's row like Stan Lee did when he got Ditko and Kirby and all them. Worry about what's inside the book instead of putting all your bankroll into cover artists. And like, just let a dope inside artist do the cover too. That's it. You'll save on the budget. You don't have to hire all these big wigs to do covers, you know? So I think they're playing with fire when it comes to that. So, you know, that's an interesting point. During any point in the comic game, the majority of titles were shit. Yeah, that's probably a fair point. Yeah, I think they should scale back. So anyway, I want this to. I plan on hanging out tonight. I'm down to jump on whoever's going live and shit. I want to keep this as kind of like a tight video for the benefit of replay value. So I'm gonna cut this video off and leave it at a somewhat tight 30 minutes. So this is just a story time video. And I don't know, if I don't see anyone else pop up in a live stream or hit me up on IG, maybe I'll just fire this thing back up and have guests and all that shit. I didn't want to bring guests on in this format, but maybe I'll kill this thing and whatever. Let's hang out. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed the show. Like Professor Bill, I'm like Professor 84, class dismissed.